could be renamed. It could be something else, like a different options, because you don't have to be a developer to enable undo or search. But I think there are different things. Next question. Can you dev or hire someone to make a full introduction to Blender 2.83 Grease Pencil, since so much has changed and how the animators can benefit from it for newcomers coming from 2D softwares with no 3D experience? If you follow the Blender Grease Pencil fundamentals that are available on the Blender Cloud or also on YouTube, you should be good to go. There is really not that much that has changed. There is the vertex colors that change, but you can learn about that from Pepeland. So how is it? Pepeland's Twitter. Pepeland here _Pepeland. So here you can find that he is actually sharing every other day or so, is sharing these tips and tricks, Grease Pencil tips and tricks. And this is very, very updated. Well, Daniel is part of the Grease Pencil team, so he has the latest news. And he's making these videos very short, down to the point, 1 minute, 2 minutes, about a specific feature. So you should check those out. Next question. So this is not really a question, but just hoping that the graph editor gets more love, to be like most animation softwares. That is saying nothing. Yeah.
That only means something when you know other animation
softwares. Just think of this like Blender developers or anybody in Blender that not knowing exactly what's going on in the other softwares.
There was Ton once said, and it became like this really important thing, really a guideline actually, and it was actually on a tile in the toilet in the previous Blender Institute. If everybody is doing it, it must be stupid.
Yeah.
So we like as a guideline, just adding something to Blender just because other people do it, just because other software does it, that's not good enough reason. If a way of working is really brilliant, if it helps, if it makes you do the work that you want to do more efficiently, that is a good reason.
Yes.
But simply because others also do it, yeah.
It's never a good reason.
No. So tell us what you're missing. Tell us.
Specify the features.
Yes. And put them on right click select. Poke me on Blender chat in the animation module channel. Like make the developers that have to implement it enthusiastic about it, or at least make them understand why something is important, how many people are waiting for this, because honestly we don't know. Like there's so few people that give feedback about these specific things that we would love to get more.
Absolutely. So yes, be more specific with the things you ask. And also don't ask just this feature like, if everybody's doing it, I mean, if we add everything that other apps have, we should add more crashes first. And then and then we should also add things that completely are maybe not even related to Blender. Because like, I don't know, if you take a feature from Maya doesn't have a video editor as far as I know, for example, or the sculpting tool are really not as advanced of the latest Blender, or doesn't have Eevee, for example. So how can you compare one part of a software to another when they don't match? It's like saying make Blender ZBrush. A ZBrush doesn't have a motion tracker, right? So just when you think of a feature, you should think of, I mean, I'm putting examples are very far apart from each other, but just to give an example of how wide and vast, today someone I tweeted, Blender is so vast, because it's really, when you think of a feature, think in the context that you're thinking it. It's like an anime, and especially animation, where everything in Blender can be animated, from motion tracking, Grease Pencil, cache stuff, actions, materials, shaders, nodes, video sequence options, strips.
I was going through the source code recently of the animation system, and I was looking at volume, like not a volume object, but just audio, sound volume. and there was a bug where you couldn't animate the scene volume since 2.80, and that's fixed now.
Thank you.
But it made me look into audio handling, and I found out that with the FFmpeg export options, you could even animate the bit rate of the exported video.
Yeah.
I don't know why it would make sense, and it has been removed, the ability to animate. But you could even animate that. It's crazy.
Yeah, or the Doppler speed effect, or export in 7.1 surround. Like those things. Like when you think of a feature, the one of the good stuff and the bad parts maybe for developers is that when they add or fix or change something, they had to think of all the cases.
Yes.
Yep. So, all right. Next question. We're 10 seconds past for 1 hour of live stream. Are you okay with the hangout? You still have some drinks? Cool. Oh, no. Okay. So we get
Maybe I'll pop off.
Okay. 5 questions and then we call it a day. All right. So 5 more questions. Actually, we reached the ones without votes, so I'm gonna go to the bottom to get the first ones and be fair. So Sean Becker says, "Hey, I hope you're all staying safe. Quick question: I create a lot of procedural textures in Blender, and I was wondering if there is a way to use the output from those in modifiers instead of baking out a texture and then applying it to a mesh with a modifier. Take the displacement modifier there. Currently there is a texture input. Is it possible to get a material input there as well? No, but I would put my money in I will bet for modifier nodes to handle this kind of stuff. Hopefully.
I'm really looking forward to modifier nodes and constraint nodes.
Ooh.
I think it will help a lot.
And expand it even more. More of a nightmare, yay. All right, so...
And especially the texture nodes are a leftover from Blender internal, if I remember correctly. And Blender internal rendering engine has been removed since 2.80, but since other systems were still using the texture nodes, those haven't been removed yet. So it is actually quite impressive that it's still working and still in there.
I've been using it. This works most of the time. All right, so next question is, what is the easiest and most effective way to multiply any parameter / tool value changed by the pressure of the pen? I found, this is actually a code question. I found the slow mouse in the wmoperators.c, but I'm not a coder, just a curious guy, and it seems a sweet spot for this. Do you have any experience with input devices or?
Nope.
So if we could make an analog versions of the precision mode shift for tablet users, it would be great. This is the main feature request of my proposal. You can read the explanation here, and it's a link to a right-click select thread with more info about it, and even a nice icon. It's interesting. I don't know who would. Maybe for Campbell, this is something to look at.
Yeah.
But yeah, please vote it up on right-click select if you think it's should be in. Next question number 4. It was 5, 4, 3.
3.
Thank you, Pablo. Sorry, my counting is getting a bit. Thank you, Pablo and Sivren, and every one of you at Blender for making 2.90 happen, even in this global catastrophic time. Yes, so nice that Blender.
We have to stay home and code all the time. It's horrible.
It's horrible with the cat on your lap. It's a nightmare.
Yes.
Next, is Will the Madcap. Just read the nice part and then move on. So will the Madcap plus gradient background HDR image ever happen again? If it's possible on the updates after 279. What? Madcap plus gradient background or HDR image ever happen again?
I have no idea.
What do you, I don't know what he means actually, because, or she. because it's if you have matcaps, the background is completely different. You can use the world, viewport, or the theme where you can use a background, an actual background. So in the world, you're gonna use the world settings in that case. Or maybe it means more like having an actual HDR image and matcaps. Yeah, no, I don't think that's even been planned. Maybe it's worth it. I don't even remember that it was possible before. Next question.
Hey,
Oh, Sean Kennedy.
Sean Kennedy is in the chat.
Yeah, he's
Hey,
in the
Sean.
chat.
No,
Hello,
we
Sean.
did. We didn't talk about the compositor.
We talked all the whole episode. You should watch it. The whole thing up until now. Yes. All right. Should be nice to have in the show. Would you be apt for it, John? Yes. Yes, I'm answering for him. So next question. So number 2 would be, will episode 100 be the first to start on time? Huh. I know the answer. No. But hey, you know what? We were actually here. Look at my my Blender. This is the console where I compile Blender. You can see here that there was a problem running Blender like up to the last minute that was fixed by Julian. So here you can see the time. This is my own script. When I finish the script, I add the time just to know. And then here it was when I started. So I got reasons. And even then we started and we had issues with the audio, so who knows. All right, next. So that was the question. No, joking. Hope all devs are doing good and no one's gotten ill. I think not so far.
No, it's all good.
Luckily. So okay, number 2, I think. The other one wasn't really a question. So, hey guys, congrats on the show. I really enjoyed. I want to say thank you because you really encouraged me to get into the code. That was for you. And implement a feature in the sequencer. Oh my. That I've been needing for quite a while. And I think most people do. That is the smooth frame interpolation option in the speed controller. Of course, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Oh, look at that.
Speed control effect. So I also wanted to give a shout out to Richard Antalnik. He is the developer, module owner of the video sequence editor, for his help and guide in this process. This is the patch I submitted the other day, and I want if you want to check it out. Saludos de Uruguay. Saludos Uruguay. So there is a patch for smooth frame interpolation. You know what? I'm gonna give it a heart, and I hope that Richard can check it out. Oh, Sergey.
Yeah, well, Sergey, Richard, Campbell is looking at it.
Is looking at it. So
that's looking good.
You're getting the top of the top here, checking it, like Sergey, Campbell, Richard, and more. And there is Israel. This is you. This is the answer. So it's getting the right eyes on it. Don't worry.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. All right. So, and that also wasn't really a question, but let's see. I don't know if this has been already asked. At the moment, there is an issue with 2.8 on Surface Pro 7 devices. Basically, the viewport is sort of lagging. I've been trying 2.79 and it's not lagging. In this case, it's testing 2.79 against 2.8, especially on these mobile devices. It's really, they're completely different worlds in terms of graphics card support. 2.79 supports OpenGL 2.1, whereas 2.8 only 3.3 and above. So if you have issues, please report them. But if I don't know how old is the Surface Pro 7. I don't know if that's the latest, or maybe if it's too old, then it's not gonna work. Best thing is to report. So. Yeah. And the last question, Psycho Mantisa. Is that Mantisa? But Psycho is anyway working on hardware acceleration for the compositor. In 2.8, it slugs like hell, even when cycles and Eevee are crazy fast. Cycles and Eevee are actually completely unrelated to the compositor. Like cycles and Eevee can both be GPU, whereas the compositor is not. You can have though OpenCL, but I don't know if that's even working nowadays. the OpenCL option.
We should get Jeroen in a live stream. He is one of the original creators of the compositor.
He
so
made this
would know.
compositor. So
Yeah.
so we should get him. And all right, so let's last question, just so we because I have it right here. So on the right side tool shelf where the modifiers and materials, so in the properties editor, are, it's sometimes hard to find some settings. Is it possible to add a search feature above them to allow to quickly filter through all the tabs for what you want? Maybe even have it a contextual. So for example, if you're in the materials tab, it will search only materials. Yes, it is possible, and yes, it's actually it's planned for at some point in the future. But there was there's actually like a task already thought for, like planned by the Blender UI team. Julian Eisel was working on it. Was like planning to work on it. William is the designer of the Blender UI team, and he even made a mock-up how it should look. So everything is there ready in place to make it. Julian now just finished the checkbox stuff. He is also working on the asset manager, I guess, I hope at some point. And together with him is a new developer that is joining the team with a 3-month grant from the Blender Development Fund. So if you're part of the fund, there's a grant that was actually, we should update the grants page with all this fun stuff that is happening. So Hans Goody, he's working, he actually made the custom bevel profiles for Blender 2.82 for the last release. And he's now working on the UI. He's the one working on the modifiers drag and drop, which, talking about dropping, it might be dropping soon, as in like next week. Maybe on Friday next week we can already show it or talk about it. That will be super fun. So yes, join the development fund if you want to get more developers involved. This is what keeps Blender running or like sprinting, because it's really going super fast lately. And that it's I think that's all. Right? We are already like 15, 12, 11 minutes late. So okay. Thank you, Sivran, for hanging out here. And in the chat.
It's my pleasure.
In the chat. Yeah. You're actually active in the chat. Thank you.
Of course.
So nice. All right. I think I don't have anything else to add. Do you have anything else to add?
No. Have a nice weekend. And yeah.
If you want to
enjoy
learn
scripting.
Yes, exactly. Enjoy scripting. If you want to learn scripting for artists / anybody that really wants to learn scripting for Blender users, basically, because if you, or we're all artists.
Oh yeah, if you're using Blender, you're an artist, right?
Exactly. Yes, you can call yourself. You can say, "Mom, I'm an artist." All right. Cool. All right. So, thank you once again. I will wrap it up. I think we can just wave at the same time. And together we can listen to the epic. I actually call it epic. I have an app for calling this, and I call it epic in red. So yeah, let's call the epic in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Gile. All right, I don't think you get to hear the song, the music, but I'm playing.
I do.
Okay, so it's blasting on. Ah, you do?
Oh yeah.
Okay, I hear it. Nice. All right. So thank you. See you again next week for another Blender Today on Monday, hopefully. Everything goes fine. Bye-bye. Stay safe. Wash your hands and stay home. Don't go away. Don't go out. Don't go out. Enjoy. Script. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
確かにこうちょっとカクカクしてんなっていうのが見える。ただこれは座標で言うと
Hello and welcome to Scripting for Artists. My name is Sibugan, and in this episode I will show you how to create your own operator. So far we only created snippets of code. You can use them, but they're not the most user-friendly. Many people have asked for ways to create menus and buttons and custom panels and stuff. In this episode we will not look at that yet, but we will look at a necessary first step, which is creating your first operator. First we will look at what an operator is exactly. Then we will see how to create your own operator and how to make it more flexible by passing parameters to it. And then we conclude by limiting the operator to a specific context. An operator is the glue between menus, buttons, and hotkeys, and the code that should be executed by them. In the first episode, we already worked with operators by copy-pasting them from menus and buttons into our own script. Operators can be implemented in Blender itself in the C programming language, or they can of course be written in Python. And no matter how they're made, they all have the same ingredients. First is an identifier. So this is what you would put after the bpy.ops. So in this operator example, it's far from complete, but we're building it up. So in this example, it would be bpy.ops.sfa.example. These are always in the form of some category dot a name. Usually it's best to pick a category that already exists, like object or mesh or sculpt or whatever is suitable for your operator. But as you can see, you can also create your own. Then we have a label. This is what appears on the menu items and buttons, and a description that is shown as a tooltip. Then everything is combined into a class, and this is something that we will look at in a minute. For now, just think of it as some pot in which we gather all the ingredients of our operator. You can see that the class is named after the operator, so we have the category in capitals, then OT for the operator type, and then the rest of the identifier. So far we've seen descriptions but not actual code yet, and this can be added in different ways for different purposes. So here are the possibilities from simple to complex. You have execute, and this is where you put the main functionality of the code. If you want to create 600 monkeys, then this is the place to do it. The execute function is also what gets called from Python directly. So if you call an operator like bpy.ops.something, this is the function that gets called. Then we have invoke. This function is called when the operator is called for a menu or a button. If you want to do something extra in that case, or you want to have slightly different behavior, then you can do that in invoke, and you can then call your execute function from there. And now we get to the most complex, the modal one. The modal function is for special operators that need to run for a longer period of time. This receives all kinds of events from Blender, from when you move your mouse, you click on buttons, you use the keyboard, that kind of stuff. Things like the Blender Cloud Texture Browser or CG Cookies with TopleFlow are implemented like this. If after all of this you're in doubt about which function to use, keep it simple, just use the execute function. If that turns out not to be able to do what you want to do, then you have a concrete reason to look at something more complex, but before that, just keep things simple. Now let's turn this into an actual operator that we can use. Let's create some more monkeys. Let's start by removing what we don't need. Let's keep it simple, just an execute function. If you look at the mesh operators, you can see that they start with bpy.ops mesh primitive monkey add, for example, or here bpy.ops mesh primitive icosphere add. So all the operators that create a new mesh object, they start with mesh. So let's keep doing that. So the ID name becomes mesh, and we're going to create a monkey grid. So monkey grid, label monkey grid. The tooltip will be let's spread some joy, and then the class name we have to change. That becomes the category underscore OT underscore monkey grid. The execute function has to do something, but it also has to tell Blender whether everything succeeded or not. So if everything was all right, you return finished, and that tells Blender that the code actually performed well. But maybe your operator cannot work. Maybe it is for extruding a mesh and the mesh doesn't have any vertices. So in that case, you return cancelled. There are a few other options, and they are all described in the manual. To go there, you go to help, and then Python API reference, and then to the section about bpy.ops. So let's assume that everything will work correctly. We will return finished, and now all we have to do is put the code here that creates our monkey grid. So let's copy the code from chapter 3 of Scripting for Artists and put it here. So this creates our 600 monkeys in rows of 25, having one unit, like Blender unit, between them. The operator is almost done already. So we have all the ingredients here. The only thing that we need to do now is to tell Blender that this operator exists. And this is called registration. Fortunately, this is rather simple. We just call bpy.utils.register class and then the name of the class, in our case, meshot monkey grid. For symmetry, there should also be a unregister function. So that looks like this. Instead of calling register class, it calls unregister class. So it basically undoes what the register function was doing. And then we're almost there. It's just that, as you know, when you have a function like this, it's not automatically called when you run the script. And there's a little trick for this. If you add some magic like this in here, and it looks a bit weird, but basically what this means is that if this script is run, then it should call the register function. There's multiple ways in which Blender can access your script. It can execute it, but it can also be imported from something else. Just like we import bpy, other code can import this file as well. So there's a distinction between being imported from somewhere else and being run. And only when it's being run should it call the register function, and that is what this code does. So now what we can do, let's just name this monkeygrid.py for good measure. And then let's click play. And nothing happened, which is kind of a good thing. We didn't see any error message. Our code doesn't show any message. So silence is kind of good here. So let's see what happens now. bpy ops mesh. There we go. We can create a monkey grid. The operator is there. Let's spread some joy. Let's not call it here. Let's see if we can find our new operator here in the F3 menu. You tap monkey and there's your monkey grid. So that's really cool. Press enter to execute it, and as you can see, Blender now freezes while it's creating the 600 monkeys. And this is what happens when you do something that takes time in the execute function, and that is okay. The code is part of this blend file, so let's see what happens when we create a new blend file. And as you can see, the operator is still there. It's been loaded into memory of Blender, it's been registered, and it just keeps ticking around. Now let's see what happens if we restart Blender. And now the monkey grid operator is no longer there. And this is because Blender doesn't just execute all the scripts that it can find in a blend file. You have to tell it to do that. First, you have to make sure that the name of the text file ends in .py. And then here in the text menu, you can check the register checkbox. Now let's save, restart Blender. And now it's there. So let's have some fun and add some parameters. When you add a cube, what you see here on the left is called the redo panel. When you open it, you see different parameters that you can set. So what happens is that when you change a parameter's value, Blender pushes the undo button automatically and then re-executes the operator. And that is why it's called the redo panel, because it's redoing things all the time. So let's add support for the redo panel to our operator. We start by declaring the properties that we want to have. And this will be the number of monkeys in the X direction, number of monkeys in the Y direction, and monkey size. Just like operators live in bpy.ops, the properties live in bpy.props. So again, if you want to have more information, just go to Help, Python API Reference, and then click on the bpy.props section. I will show you what it looks like. Let's call it countx, bpy props in property. Int stands for integer, which means a whole number, because we cannot have half monkeys. So count x has to be either 1 or 2 or 3, but it can never be like 2.5 or something. So it's whole numbers only. And this declares that we want to have that property. There's a big difference between the colon that we have here and the equal sign that we have there. This sets a name to a value. And this is for things that just have to be set. We have to set BL ID name to mesh monkey grid to make it work. But here we don't really set anything. We just declare to Blender, this is an int property, please act accordingly. You can add some parameters here to change the behavior. First of all, we should set a name. We can call it X. It may be a bit cryptic, but for now it will do. And we can add a description, number of monkeys in the X direction. So let's copy this to the Y. Name is Y, and number of monkeys in the Y direction. And we have a size, which is another bpy props dot float property. Float stands for floating point. It's a technical term for just decimal numbers. Name is size. Description is size of each monkey. So this gives us our properties, but they're not used yet. So let's take a look at the execute function where we're supposed to use them. This comment, it has to go because we're no longer creating 600 monkeys in rows of 25, but it's all flexible. So let's remove that for now. Now we have to access the properties. So we've declared them, and this self gives us access to the actual value. Self is a Python thing, and I won't go into detail here about what it represents. Just know that if you declare a property here as countx, then you can access it here as self.countx. So the total number of monkeys is the number of monkeys in the X and in the Y direction. And this 25 here was the number of monkeys in the X direction. And then all that is left is to set a size. And that's it. Let's give it a try. Let's see what happens in the console first. And there you can see our properties, count X, count Y, size, and they're all equal to 0 because we haven't set any default yet. And there we have our 3 monkeys. Before we go to actually call it from the viewport, let's set some sensible defaults. Default is 3. For the Y, default is 2. I choose different values there on purpose. This is a default, so when somebody clicks on the monkey grub button or selects it from the F3 list, this will be what they see. Because they see a 3x2 grid, they immediately know what they need to change. If they want to change the 3 to a 4, they just change the 3 to a 4 without having to think about whether it's the X or the Y direction. So if we were to give them the same default, then they wouldn't be able to see it, and then they would have to think, like, which direction is X, which direction is Y, which value do I want to change? And this is why I give them distinct values. Finally, a default for the size, run again, delete everything. And there you can see your defaults, and when we execute without any values, it just uses those defaults. And the same for the F3 menu. There's one more step left, and that is to get that redo panel. We have the properties, so Blender knows what should hypothetically go in there. It just doesn't know yet that we support that redo panel. So let's tell Blender that we do. This is done through BL options. The default value is register, and we have to add undo to it. This will give us the final ingredient. There you go. Now we can make them big and small and give them even invalid values. So to make it pleasant to use for people, we should really set limits to these sliders so that it's all sensible values that you can select there. Fortunately, this is again quite simple. We can set a minimum. Let's set it to 1 because creating 0 monkeys doesn't make sense, and creating negative monkeys even less. So let's start at 1. Let's set the maximum to 10 for now. We can do the same for the count Y, and we can set the size 0 to minimum, and the maximum, let's set it to 1. And now we can drag, and things are still nice and sane. You can see that it already gets a little bit slower when these numbers increase. And we still can't get to the 600 we had before. Even when I type 100 here, it is cut off to the maximum. So this is why Blender has a soft limit. The hard limit is what we set now. That's the absolute limit of the value of the property, whereas the soft limit is what the slider will do when you drag around. So if you want to allow maximum values that are bigger than 10, or sizes that are bigger than 1, but still want these limits as the limit for the slider, you can change the maximum into a soft maximum. The minimum that we have now really is the minimum, because creating 0 monkeys doesn't make sense. Negative monkeys is impossible. Also, creating a negatively sized monkey is impossible. So let's change the maximum to soft. Now the dragging is still the same, but we can set it to create much more monkeys than you would get with dragging. Now let's get back to that class declaration. I will explain a little bit more about how classes work in an intuitive way, I hope, without going too much into technical details. Classes use a system called inheritance. Just like with people, it's like a parent-child structure. So in this case, bpy.types.operator is the parent, and mesh.ot_monkey_grid acts as the child. If you ask a child a question that it knows the answer to, say, do you want to have a cookie? The child will say yes immediately, without asking the parent, of course. But if you ask about taxes, then, Mom, please help me out here because I don't know anything. And then the child defers that question to the parent. And this is the same way that classes work in Python, roughly. We could do without the BL options. Our child didn't know anything about it, so Python asked the parent. And when we want to have something different, we can add BL options to our child, to our class, and then that is asked first, so that takes precedence over whatever the parent wants. So we always have lucky children who gets all the cookies they want. So before I end this video, I have 2 more things that I want to tell you. One, again, we look at the execute function. You see that it gets a context parameter, and this is pretty much like the context we've seen before. It gives us context.object, context.scene, context to .selected objects, all these things you've seen before in bpy.context. It gets here as well, but then localized specifically for this operator. So as a general rule of thumb, if you have a function that gets a context, use that context and don't use bpy.context. So if you want to do something with all the selected postbones in this execute function, you would use context.selected postbones. Another function, and that is the second thing that I wanted to show you, another function that gets a context is the poll function. And it's written in a bit weird way, but just take it from me, it works like that. Again, you get a context in this function, but instead of doing something, like instead of performing an action, this function is meant to check whether that action will be possible. So this poll function is called by Blender every time this operator is supposed to show up in a menu or as a button on a panel. I can show you how this works. Right now it returns true, which means that it is always allowed, just as it was before. And just as it was before, it shows up here in the F3 menu. When I change this to false, it will never show up anywhere, which is kind of useless. Let's tweak this to make it a bit more useful. You can see here in the console, we have autocomplete, which makes sense in a Python console. But that same operator does not work in the 3D viewport because the context is wrong. This is also something we can do ourselves. Right now, when I change this to true again, the monkey grid operator also shows up in the context of the Python console, and it will show up anywhere in Blender, which is not exactly the right way to go. Let's take another look at a variable inside that context. Context.area gives you the area that is currently active in Blender's user interface. So in this case, it would be the console, but if the mouse is here and we pull up the F3 menu, then all of a sudden it's the 3D viewport that is active. And here it would be the outliner. So every area in Blender has its own area type, and we can use that in our poll function to make sure that it's only working in the area that we want it to work in. One thing I don't really like is guesswork. So we know now that the area type of the console is console, but is it in 3D viewport? Is it 3D view, 3D underscore view? Is it 3D viewport? I don't know. So let's make our script tell us instead. I can just say print my area is context.area.type. And let's see what happens on the terminal where all these kind of prints are sent to. Here you see the console, and immediately you see it being called my area is view 3D. But when I do it here in the outliner, my area is outliner. If I do it here in the properties panel, my area is properties. So that way you can just use these print statements to know what you have to put where. So we know which value to use for the 3D viewport, so let's just do that. If context.area.type equals view 3D, then return true, otherwise we can return false. Let's see how this works. Here it still shows up, but here it's no longer there. And of course here and there, now it only shows up where we want it to show up. One final thing, these kind of constructs, I see them a lot, also from experienced programmers. It's more complex than necessary actually, because this guy is already an expression that is true or false. So basically what the code is saying is that if the value of this thing, this selected expression, if the value of that thing is true, return true. And if the value of that thing is false, return false. So that basically means return the value of this thing, which you can, of course, write as this. So that was it for this episode of Scripting for Artists. If you have any questions or remarks, please leave a comment down below, and I will see you soon.
You never say how you really feel. How can I know if this thing is real? Is it all in my head? Am I making it up? Am I thinking too much? I know that part of the blame is mine. I ain't been saying what's on my mind. I've been hiding so much, ain't been honest enough, scared of opening up. Why can't I just say it? 'Cause even if it's just in my mind, my heart is still hurting, so I know I should just swallow my pride. My pride. Speak up, 'cause I can't keep this up. I need you, so tell me what you want, 'cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Speak up, 'cause I can't keep this up. I need you, so tell me what you want, 'cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Speak up. Hoping that I didn't waste my time, been too cold with you instead of real with you. Should have poured it all out, let you see all my doubts, let you know that I'm down. Just say it, 'cause even if it's just in my mind, my heart is still hurting, so I know I should just swallow my pride. My pride. Speak up, 'cause I can't keep this up. I need you, so tell me what you want, 'cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Speak up, 'cause I can't keep this up. I need you, so tell me what you want, 'cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Just say it, 'cause even if it's just in my mind, my heart is still hurting, so I know I should just swallow my pride. My pride. Speak up, 'cause I can't keep this up. I need you to tell me what you want, 'cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Speak up, 'cause I can't keep this up. I need you to tell me what you want, cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Speak up, cause I can't keep this up. I need you, so tell me what you want, cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Speak up, cause I can't keep this up. I need you, so tell me what you want, cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Speak up.
Hey, are you okay? Yeah.
You never say how you really feel. How can I know if this thing is real? Is it all in my head? Am I making it up? Am I thinking too much? I know that part of the blame is mine. I ain't been saying what's on my mind. I've been hiding so much, ain't been honest enough, scared of opening up. Why can't I just say it? Cause even if it's just in my mind, my heart is still hurting, so I know I should just swallow my pride, my pride. Speak up, cause I can't keep this up. I need you, so tell me what you want, cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Speak up, cause I can't keep this up. I need you, so tell me what you want, cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Speak up, hoping that I didn't waste my time. Been too cold with you instead of real with you. Should have poured it all out, let you see all my doubts, let you know that I'm down. Just say it, cause even if it's just in my mind, my heart is still hurting, so I know I should just swallow my pride, my pride. Speak up, cause I can't keep this up. I need you, so tell me what you want, cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Speak up, cause I can't keep this up. I need you, so tell me what you want, cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Just say it, cause even if it's just in my mind, my heart is still hurting, so I know I should just swallow my pride, my pride. Speak up, cause I can't keep this up. I need you to tell me what you want, cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Speak up, cause I can't keep this up. I need you to tell me what you want, cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Speak up, cause I can't keep this up. I need you, so tell me what you want, cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Speak up, cause I can't keep this up. I need you, so tell me what you want, cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Speak up. Everything hit naturally, and all I know is we got to be, got to be, got to see it. It's moving like a mile a minute. I wasn't ready, but you said you're in it. Caught you at the corner right before we finished, but you know it's on sight, you can have it all. It's automatic, was as soon as I saw you. It's automatic now, it's automatic now, it's automatic. I give all of my love to you. It's automatic now, it's trouble, so you don't know pressure. Dancing in the rain, but you hate bad weather. I know you want it all, cause you don't know better. You don't wanna beg, cause you ain't no beggar. Boy, you got a love that you still don't treasure. I know you want it all, cause you don't know better. Cause it's a long time wasted, but you still don't waste it. But you still get wasted. I can't watch you do this alone. Cause it's a long time wasted, when you still go wasted. When you still get wasted. I can't watch you do this alone. Alone. Nobody likes me. No. I'm sleeping in late and I'm wrapped in your sweater. Cause oh, you keep me warm, even when you're gone. I'm looking through your drawers, even know that I better not. And I opened up a storm. It's raining down, I'm torn. All the pretty boys know, all the pretty girls know. I'm left here by myself, waiting for something else. And I guess that I'll never know, guess that you'll never know. You didn't understand my heart, and I'm already torn apart. Cause I thought you were like me, but nobody's like me. I thought that you liked me. Nobody likes me. Nobody likes me. I don't even know what I want when I see it, no. But suddenly I'm crushed. Didn't know I had a crush. Didn't know I had a crush. Nothing's ever there when you know that you want it. But I know I got love. It's what I got enough. It's what I got enough though. All the pretty boys know, all the pretty girls know. I'm left here by myself, waiting for something else. And I guess that I'll never know, guess that you'll never know. You didn't understand my heart, and I'm already torn apart. Cause I thought you were like me, but nobody's like me. I thought that you liked me, nobody likes me. know some things are better left unsaid, but that don't mean that we can't talk. We're going places that we never been, and we both have our rights and wrongs. I don't want you to close them off. If you told me who you are, would you leave out the dark? Only give me the better parts, like the door that there are. Call me when it's over, show your truest side. I wanna get to know you in a different light. So call me when you're not high. It ain't always roses, so you don't have to lie. I wanna get to know you in a different light. So call me when you're not high. Slow riding highs won't take your lows away. I can still feel them in your arms. You bite your tongue when you're too close to me, but you're not fooling anyone, and I've seen you do it more than once. If you told me who you are, would you leave out the dark? Only give me the better parts, like the door that there are. Call me when it's over, show your truest side. I wanna get to know you in a different light. So call me when you're not high. It ain't always roses, so you don't to tell me what you want, cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Speak up, cause I can't keep this up. I need you to tell me what you want, cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Speak up, cause I can't keep this up. I need you, so tell me what you want, cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Speak up, cause I can't keep this up. I need you, so tell me what you want, cause I've had enough. Stop saying what I wanna hear. If you're breaking my heart, do it sooner than later. Speak up. I threw a glass at the mirror. You told me that's bad luck. To make myself clearer, I just don't give a fuck. I push it to your limit so many times that I can't keep count. But all I wanna do is keep you around. I don't know what I'm doing, but I don't. Yeah, I know what I'm doing. 'Cause the way you hate me, hate me, hate me, hate me. Yeah, it makes me really want ya. When you hate me, I press all your buttons just so I can rip them off. It's not an assumption, I know it's all my fault. Tried meditation for breakfast, but it didn't do much for me. 'Cause my hunger is reckless for something crazy. I don't know what I'm doing, but I don't. Yeah, I know what I'm doing. 'Cause the way you hate me, hate me, hate me, hate me. Yeah, it makes me really want ya. When you hate me, hate me. Cause the way you hate me, hate me, hate me, hate me. Yeah, it makes me really want ya. When you hate me, hate me. I heard it's never nothing till it's gone right. So you fucked me up and kicked me out the door, right? And now I'm back home sitting on the floor, right? Bucket down staring at the moonlight. You left me underwhelmed. Intentions got you what you wanted. Is that what you wanted? You should be alone. You should really be alone. You should be alone. You should really be alone. I let you have the best of who I am, right? And I laughed even when I was a joke, right? Now you're back home smoking with your friends, right? And here I am writing about the end, right? intentions got you what you wanted. Is that what you wanted? You should be alone. You should really be alone. You should be alone. You should really be alone. I know that you know. It was slow. Yeah, you know. You should be alone. You should really be alone. You should be alone. You should really be alone. Nobody likes me. No. I'm sleeping in late and I'm wrapped in your sweater. Cause oh, you keep me warm even when you're gone. I'm looking through your drawers even though that I better not. And I opened up a storm. It's raining down and I'm torn. All the pretty boys know, all the pretty girls